It is now recording. Volume is on. Everyone should be in now. So let's go ahead and share the screen back to the Notepad++. Okay, so we are back. This is the script that we were working on. This will be in the second video now for today. So this one is, we were saying that it's two arrays. We're just kind of playing with these arrays. We have an empty array and then the workdays. And we're just iterating through both of them. They're not really nested. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now for the second array, the empty array that I'm iterating through. What do I want to do? This is the one where I will sorry, there's just still people coming in. All right, so this is the one where I'm going to create that same thing. I put together all the information, create a result variable, and then that's the thing that needs to be displayed. Okay, so the way to do this one is the same approach. I'm going to create result equal result plus, right? And now I'm going to take the information from the empty array. If you remember, in the empty array, we added these numbers. So I'm just going to do empty array. I'm going to reference that by index, obviously, just like we did before. And then here we can take a look at making sure that since those were numbers, right? Those were numbers. We are going to convert it to string, so we can do the toString typecasting over here that we have available. So toString, and then plus, similar to what we did before, let's add a colon, a comma, whatever you want, and then plug in the information in workdays. So we have information in workdays as well. So we're going to do workdays. Okay, and then we can also reference that by index I. And then finally, we are going to add the tag. Okay, so I'm going to add a BR tag and add the semicolon at the end. So that's it. That's the function. As you can see, all I'm doing is I'm, playing with a couple of arrays, then mixing the arrays and creating a final result. So go ahead. Let's take a few minutes. Let's take a few minutes, 2-3 minutes. I'm going to let you guys complete this example. Okay. So now you need to take this code and display the information in the body of the HTML page. So you should by now, you should be able to figure this out, okay? So let's take a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. All right, so we're recording again, and hopefully you can hear me. So now let's go back to our code. Okay, you guys have had some time, hopefully, to work through it. And really, that was the point of it, to not just have you guys just follow along, but to be able to engage in solving this a little bit more on your own. All right, so now the code here was done, right? Function startup was done. So really, all you had to do was what? What was missing for this to work?
Actually calling the function within the body.
Right, calling the function, right? So we're going to go to the body. That has been our approach so far. I'm going to do startup. Do that, right? Good. What else?
Span with the ID message.
Right, having some kind of a placeholder.
Or a div, I guess, too.
Yeah, span. And we can say ID equal, in double quotes, any name, message, is fine. Very good. What else is missing? Or are we done?
The
In the
variable,
function. Oh, sorry.
the variable that will actually hold messages contents.
That's right. We need to, the label message, right? We need to grab that from the DOM object. So we need to take a look at that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. In here, possibly. I can do, yeah, here, var, label, message. And then, you know, same thing, document, get element by ID. And then in double quotes, we call the message. So message. Message, and then finally we assign the inner HTML, right? So we're going to do label message. We got it there. Inner HTML, and we assign to it result. All right, so now hopefully we've got everything if we don't have any errors. So let's go ahead, save the file. We can, this one is called arrays. So we can open it. I'm going to share the screen. And you can see basically the same thing as we had before. You know, we just added the index 100 or the number 100 to the index of each individual name. And that's it. So these are pretty easy. The next one will be a little bit more interesting. So are there any questions before we move on to the next one?
Nope.
I don't think so.
Nope. All right, so let's think about this one. This might be a problem that I just leave for you guys to finish on your own, okay? As part of the homework. So I'm gonna, but I'll give you some of the basic ideas. What we want is we want to have a drop down. Okay, we want to have a drop down. So you guys know what that control is, the one that when you click on it, you get a drop down list. Okay, so you will need to have, so I'm going to let you work on this today, plus the homework assignment, and you just try to solve it. So all I'll give you for this one is the skeleton. Okay, and then I'm going to let you work on it and ask any questions that you want. Let's see. All right, so somebody's asking me to go back to the code, so let me leave it up there for a second. So there's the code. Okay, so as I said, this problem is a little bit more complex, and I'm going to have you guys try to solve it. So I won't really give you that much of the functions code. I'll just give you the HTML and then kind of describe. Like I'll describe in with comments, basically. In my own words, I'll just say, think about this idea and think about this idea and think about this idea, and then you guys can go ahead and solve it. All right, so let's create a new file. I'm just going to call this one dropdown. Okay. .htm.
Is dropdown all one word?
Sure, it's the name of a file, right? We're going to call the file dropdown.htm. So definitely get into the habit of, for file names, of using one word. All right, so now open Notepad++. We're going to share this in a second. Yeah, you should now be seeing, let me just corroborate that the video is in fact recording. It is. Back to Notepad. Okay, so here then, as I said, I'm going to do this one sort of like suggestions for you to work on. So let's start with the basic things that you know will be there. You know, HTML. Right, the head section. Okay, body. All right, so imagine that you have a form, right? So obviously we have a form, so form tags. All right, we have a form, and our form will have several controls, right? So it'll have, let's say, it's got a text box. We're going to need a text box for input. So let's say add item, add new item here. Let's say that. All right, so then obviously we're going to have a text box. So we're going to say input type equal text. And you need to give it some kind of an ID. So I'll leave that, you need to start solving these on your own. So figure that out. But it's got some kind of an ID, right? So we got the text box there. Then we probably need some kind of a button. So that this time around, the event will be triggered by a button. So we can say input type button, for instance. And then over here, we can add an event, right? So we're going to say on click, you're going to call some function. You got to figure that out. All right. Then you can put in there some text if you'd like. So you can say value equal, this would be for adding a new item, right? So adding a new item. So the idea is that we're going to enter an item into this text box. We press the button. When we press the button, an item will be added. Where is it added? It's going to be added to the next control, which is our drop down. Okay, our drop down. Now here might be a good place to put in a break line, if you'd like. That's up to you how things are presented. So here we have the drop down that you have to dynamically build. So if you remember, drop downs in HTML can be created in various ways, right? So in the future, when we use jQuery, we will really just need a placeholder, and then we'll grab that placeholder and convert it into a jQuery dropdown. For now, we can use some of the built-in tags for dropdowns. So in this case, again, give it a name, figure it out. Now, when the dropdown should have an event, right? So what's a normal event for a dropdown is on change. So you can try that. So on change, do something with it. So maybe when on change would be when somebody clicks on the dropdown, maybe they select an item or something, the item gets displayed into a label message. Okay, so that's, you got to figure that one out as well. So then I have here, let's close, before I forget, let's close the select option, or select tag, sorry. All right, so that creates basically our placeholder for our dropdown. Okay, now that we have that, yes, I meant on change. All right, thank you. All right, so now that you have the form, that's basically your little form, right? And now you've got to figure out the code. That's really all that remains. So you go, let's go to the HTML here. And this is where I will just give you hints of how to do this, and you will work on it. Ask any questions that you would like. All right, and so let's say, what do you need? Well, we have at least two functions, right? Because we have these question marks over here and we have these question marks. So I'm just going to say function one, rather than function one. You have to logically figure out what it should be, and then function two. All right. So the question is, in one of the functions is for this behavior, right? The behavior here is when you press the button, you take the whatever's in the text box, right? So this needs to get everything. So get value from text box. That's the first thing. And then you need to add value to the drop down. You see that? That's the general purpose of this function. So you would need to add the value in the text box. Once you have that, you need to grab also the drop down itself, right? The select tag. And then if you remember the way that selects worked, and I'll just add this here as kind of a comment, is that you would have select and then select, right? And inside, and then you would do something like this. You would do something like this, and then inside the select, if you remember from your 110, you had options. You see that? And then you would have multiple of these options, okay? You would have multiple of these options. But the way that we're going to do this is we're going to do this dynamically this time. So you cannot hard code this, okay? That's not allowed for this problem. Instead, you have to dynamically create it. So I will give you that part. I'll just say, if you want to create an option object which does not exist, you can create it just by creating a variable option, going into DOM, document dot, instead of get element ID you will use to get the other elements. But to create a new element, right? To create a new element, you can use document dot create element. You see that? And then this will allow you to create an actual DOM element. In this case, we create option. Okay, so you create option there, semicolon, and now you have this element. Okay. Now that element needs to have other values in it. So this part I'll also help you with. So you'll take now the variable option and you'll say to option itself, add specific element. So let me actually move to the whiteboard for this. All right, so what I mean by this is something like this. You should be seeing the whiteboard. We create the element option, right? So we create option here. But option is an object which will have things associated with it, like the text value. And then let's say attribute 1 and attribute 2 and so on, right? So we need to add those parameters as well so that in the end, we end up with a single option that we can move around. And then this option will need to be added to the select. Okay, well, we're going to have to link that option in there to the select itself. So this part I will help you with, but the rest of the code you kind of have to figure out on your own. Make sense?
Sounds good.
Good. All right, so let's go ahead then and go back to the notepad here. All right, so we have options. So that here I'm going to add a few parameters to this. So I'm going to say append child. So remember, that's how this works. You can append things. So append child. And what do we append here? We're going to take, again, document. Oops. Document dot. This time we create text node. Create text node. And here then we can provide something, right? So for instance, I'm just going to say hello. Keep in mind that could be a variable, okay? So then you can figure out basically what should go there. But that could be a variable instead of just a string literal, okay? And then once you have added text to the option, you can also set an attribute for it. So we can do the same thing. I'm going to say option dot set attribute. Set attribute. And in this case, the attribute is going to be value, which, as you know, is a common attribute in nodes. And then here, again, add some something. So maybe it's a hammer, right? And it's a hammer, or it's something. You can say price equal, 100, right? Something like that. So then add price. Obviously, you need to figure out, for now, it could just be a default value. So it could be 0, whatever you want it to be. Now, the key thing is, once the option has been created, which all of this creates the option, now the next step is this part here. So add value to the dropdown, or let's say, so I should maybe say get value from text box, add value to option, which you just created. Then instead of adding value to dropdown, add option to dropdown. So that's the part that you're going to do here. So now you need to add option to dropdown. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, that part, I'll give you this, assuming you already have the dropdown because you got it with get element by ID, then now you can do dropdown dot append child. And which child do you append? You append the entire option object. You see that, guys?
Yeah.
And that's it. All right, so you should be able to solve the rest of this. That's just for adding an option to dynamically adding an option to a dropdown. Remember, this shows you pretty much what we're going to be doing. All right, most of the semester, this is the kind of thing that we're going to be doing, creating everything dynamically, except with jQuery instead of. Now, as far as the other functions, so now let's focus. Let me save this. Now let's focus on the other function, which is this one, right? So what happens when you have a dropdown and, on change or an event like that? What would you want? Well, what you want is you want to display, you want to retrieve the value that's in there, hammer and the price maybe. And then you want to display it in a label message. So what you can do here is just say, write the code to retrieve the value from the selected index of the drop-down control, right? Control. And then display that value in a label message. That's it. That's what you want to do. All right. So what's the procedure? You get element by ID, get the drop down. From the drop down, there's when you grab the drop down element, there's a way to get the selected index. So you can create a variable called index, var index, and then you can assign to it from the drop down that you just got, you can assign to it selected index. Okay, that's a method. So now it's basically like, you clicked on this and you selected hammer. Then you went further down, you scrolled further down, you click on the next one and you selected nails or something, right? So it just gives you the index of the selected item. So obviously with that selected index, now you would need to do something. To retrieve the value, you can try something like this. Now, obviously this is very long, and in the future with jQuery, this becomes a lot easier, but we can do var value drop down, right? Drop down. And then from the drop down, we basically look at the array of all the child nodes. And then from there, we select the item that meets the criteria of having that index. You see that? So we use the index there. And then once we have that object, again, through chaining, we can just look through the attributes. We look through the attributes. And then out of those, once we find in the attributes, we look for one particular attribute, the one that we created, right? We created it up here. It's called value. So we can go over here and say, get named item value. And then once we have that through chaining again, since we got value, we can actually get whatever's in there. So that's the price. So we can, by just calling value, and that's it. All right. So that's a quick way. So that's basically the correct code for that part. So now you have the index. You used it down here. You have the value, and then the rest should be pretty easy to display on the label message. So down here, I'm just going to give you a hint that label message goes there. All right. So that's the problem that I want you to work on. So use the rest of the time to solve this problem and also to work on the homework assignment. Right, so let's go to, so I've explained the problem, right? So this problem is now assigned, finish it, and then also the homework. So let me go to, let me save it first. All right, so let me stop this here. Let's now go to the Brightspace. All right, so we are back on, you should be seeing Brightspace now. So I'm going to go to content. I'm going to go to here. Now under JavaScript, I'm going to create two new assignments, okay? So one will be this example that we just did. So I'm going to call it homework drop down. That's a good name. Drop down, dynamic drop down. Dynamic drop down. Yeah, that should be enough. All right. This is going to be due. Today is what, the 21st? So it's due on the 28th by 10 p.m. Should be displayed after today. If you finish it today, just submit it today. Keep it open until Saturday. All right, so here I'm going to add the text. So complete the dynamic drop-down example we discussed in class. Make sense, guys? That's what you have to do, right? Please see the video for reference. Please see the video for details, let's say. Is this clear, guys, what you have to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure that you can add items to the drop down, and then that you can retrieve an item from the drop down and display it on the label message. Let me just add that. Make sure that you can add elements to the drop down and also select elements from the drop down and display them on a label message, which you should understand by now what that means. All right, so that's the first assignment. That it's a separate link. Then the second one is complete, obviously, this Word document. So I'm going to click on it just to remind you. So this is JavaScript programming, right? This one. So all I'm going to say is complete the attached assignment. Okay, so let's go back to JavaScript. I'm going to add this new assignment then. Same thing, this is homework. This will be JavaScript grade calculator. Okay, again, do the same thing. 100. The due date will be the same. Today's the 21st, so it's going to be on the 28th by 10 p.m. You should be able to submit from today all the way to Saturday. All right, so again, complete the attached handout for the grade. Follow the instructions in the document. All right, so you have two links. Obviously, you're going to zip all your files for this, for only this, update them, and then for the other one, submit your files and update. Is this description clear, guys?
Yeah, it's clear.
Right, you have the attached document there. All right, you have two problems basically for your assignment. Let's see, there's some questions in the chat. Oh, okay. Okay, great. So all of this is there. Let's go to, so the homework assignments have been posted. I just like, I don't like to have just one big homework. It makes it harder for me to grade. So when I have them like this, it's easier. So let's, so I'm going to close this. As you can see, next week, the next module is object-oriented programming. If you'd like, start looking at those when you can. So now let's go back to the Notepad++. I'm just going to leave this on sort of here on the screen and then let you guys work through this, complete it. And then, this is your open lab. So I like to give some open time in case any of you have questions. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop the recording and I'm just going to leave it open for you guys to ask any questions you want about the homework due tonight or any homeworks that are upcoming. Okay. All right, guys, we are going to stop here for today. As I said, you have plenty of homework assignments. Remember, this course is very much like this, right? All semester, we're just going to be coding. So that's what makes it fun and exciting, because you're really building very complex applications. And as I said, the whole point is, you know, this homework one kind of shows you, man, do I really need to create 100 text boxes for this homework? Sure. But that's why you really want to learn. That's why you really want to learn dynamic programming, because that way, with 4 lines of code and, you know, a for loop, you can create 100 text boxes instead of manually having to go in there. And that's really how, you know, real applications are always dynamic. They're not going to be static at all. You know, so this is where you start to really, from this class and 462 and so on, you really start to develop really nice applications. All right, so make sure you do your assignments, and then we're going to stop here for today, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.